Toy-polloi, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a toy restorer who does not exist. Toy-polloi, a young loner on a crusade to champion the cause of the broken, the helpless, the powerless, in a world of collectors who operate above the law.
Welcome to Toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from Toy-polloi, and today I'm going to be making a custom from these vintage Raiders of the Lost Ark figures. Now I say it's a custom, and the reason for that is because these are the remains of some figures that I was sent recently very kindly by Ryan. If you check out the video on my other channel Toy-polloi 2, you'll see that he sent me a whole load of bits of figures. He'd used the rest of them to make his own custom figures and sent me the remains of what was left. So they had limbs missing, they had arms missing, but there was enough in that selection to put together these sort of rough versions of Indy from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now it's not a complete figure, that's why it's looking a little bit odd currently. The head is from the map room version of Indy, and the right leg is also from the map room version of Indy. The rest of the body is the standard Indiana Jones figure, and I've already reattached the legs. That was just a case of using the boil and pop technique, which I've shown before. So you basically put the limb in boiled water, it softens up, and then you can push it back in. So I've already reattached those, and I've got four sort of pretty good looking figures, but they are not correct. And what I want to do is make a map room version of Indy, because that is a figure I don't actually have in my collection. And I thought, because we have the head of map room Indy, if I cover up the body with a nice robe, he will actually look like map room Indy. So I'm going to be making a sort of custom from these figures. Now the great thing about these figures is that they have a lot of the same construction as Star Wars figures, so you can do a lot of good things with them, like the boil and pop technique. And I've currently left this one so you can see how the head is attached. The head is attached exactly the same as the Return of the Jedi era Star Wars figure, so it's very easy to remove. In fact, I may even have Return of the Jedi, a version of Han Solo that I can take the head off and make a different version of this Indy, so he doesn't have the map room head with the cloth sort of wrapped around it. I could make a version where he looks a little bit more like Harrison Ford does in Raiders of the Lost Ark. But really what I want to do is turn these into the map room version. The first thing though I need to do is a bit of repair, because if you look at these guys, you can see some of them have got the thumbs missing. That's a very common issue with these Raiders of the Lost Ark figures. There's quite a lot of paint wear. So before I do anything, I'm going to do a few repairs to them. So let's get the thumb reattached and let's get the paint repaired. I'm not going to be going through every method I use because I've covered these so many times on my channel. I will just show you the process in sort of quick form so you can see exactly what's done. But check out some of my other videos to see all the processes involved.
That is incorrect. Try again.
Okay, so here are all the figures repaired. The two on the right, I haven't done anything to. I didn't bother touching up any of the paint because there's such minor marks on them. The two on the left here are the ones that I've repaired the thumbs on and then done a few little minor paint touch-ups. In fact, it's very hard to spot the thumbs have been repaired now. So here is the one which just had his thumb done and I've repainted it. As you can see, that's a pretty good match. And then on this chap, I've gone a little bit further because obviously I've repaired his thumb now. I've repainted most of his body because there was a lot of marks and paint rubs all over it. And then I just happen to have the remains of a Han Solo trench coat version, which happens to have the same neck peg that I mentioned earlier. So I've just swapped that over, repainted the hair. I've made the hair a little bit darker because looking at my actual sort of vintage Indiana Jones figure, the hair on that is quite dark. So there you go. There is a version of Indy without the hat on. The hair is a little bit sort of early 80s looking, I'd say, so it doesn't quite match sort of perfectly to how he looks in the movie. You can see his ears are completely covered up. Really, you would be able to see his ears, but the overall effect is quite nice, and I've got quite a unique figure here, so that's a sort of nice thing to do. And you'll have noticed at the end of that sequence that I showed you this book, which is one of my toy-polloi collecting notebooks that I send out to people who help me. And in this one, I keep notes of all the paint mixes that I do. So every time I fix up a figure, I will write down the paints that I've used to mix the colour, and it just means that when I come to repairing other figures in future, I can look back at this and go, oh, okay, well, I mixed these colours and that gave me the right sort of shade. And it's just a good way for me to sort of keep notes of what I've been doing. I used to not bother doing this and I actually just sort of refer to my own videos, but I thought as I'm fixing so many toys these days, it would be a good thing to start. So this is the start of my notes to keep of what paints I use and what paints I mix. Now we have the figures ready, we need to make a cape so that he actually looks like the map room version of Indy. So let's get on with that. Right, so how do we turn this figure into the map room version of Indy? Well, I've been looking at some of the original figures, the original version of this figure, and the robe that it has is fairly similar to one that I've just made for a Star Wars figure. So that is going to be the basis of my sort of cape making for this. In fact, this is the figure that I just made a cape for, and it's the vintage Obi-Wan Kenobi figure. I made new robes for him that had a hood that goes over his head, and it looks pretty cool. While I was making that, I also made this though, which is a version of that robe for the Tusken Raider, and the colour of this material that I used is pretty good, and I think actually the shape of the cape is also pretty good. So we're going to use this as the basis to make a new robe for Indy. We'll need to make a belt that goes around the middle, but the actual robe part of it, I think we can just use that. So what I've done is I've taken that pattern, I've printed it out. You can get this pattern from toy-polloi.com, and I've made a couple of slight modifications. I've made it slightly longer, so you can see here I've cut the edge of the pattern just a little bit longer at the bottom there, and I've cut it just a little bit longer at the top, because I think we need a robe that really does touch the floor based on what the original one looks like. So this is what we're going to use to make the new robe, and I have some of the material that I used for making that Tusken Raider cape. This is called toy knit or looped fleece. I will put a link in the description as to where I get it. Now this is not the same as the materials that they used on the Indy figures. This is the same sort of stuff that they use on Star Wars figures. I can't quite get the stuff that the Raiders figures use, so this will do, and I think it will still make a very nice looking cape. And also the original capes that are used on those Raiders figures are very nicely made. They're all hemmed and there's lots of details in them. I'm not going to do that because that is beyond my skill, so I'm going to make a fairly basic cape, but I think it will do the job. So we have this pattern here. I've already stuck on the back of it some double-sided tape, so I'm just going to stick this onto this fabric, cut it out and get making. So yeah, let's get this cut and we'll sew it all together. pattern cut out and we can start sewing it together. You can see on my original pattern that I printed out here, there are dotted lines around the edges, and that indicates where you need to sew. So what I've got to do is fold this so that the outside surface is in. There are definite inside and outside surfaces to this fabric. You can see the sort of looped fleece on the outside, and then we've got this slightly rougher one on the inside. So what I'm going to do is put this piece down exactly as I have the pattern here, and then fold these pieces down so that the inside surface is on the outside. And you'll see it starts to look like a robe already. What we've got to do is sew all around that edge there, and then we've also got to sew all around that edge there, and we'll end up with a cape. So I've got some thread here which is about the same sort of colour as this, and I'm just going to get sewing. Okay, so after a little bit of sewing, you can see I've sewn all around those edges now. It's starting to look like a robe, but it is inside out, so you just got to turn it round the right way. Just turn it like that, and I've got a paintbrush here just so I can push these arms through, because the arms are fairly small. I don't think I'll get my finger through there, so a paintbrush will do the job. That's looking good. Like so. So now you can see we have the nice surface of the material on the outside. Let's test this on a figure. So here is one of the Indy figures. I'll put this on and we'll see if it fits. Okay, that's not looking too bad at all. I'm going to say one of Indy's arms is particularly short. This shooting arm here is very short, so I may chop a bit of the end of that off and just re-sew the end of it, because you can see his hand is coming out quite nicely on the left hand side, but that arm does seem particularly short, so I might just modify that slightly. And then we also need to make a belt, because without a belt this is just going to sort of come apart, and I think the original figures actually had a belt around the middle as well. So let me do a little modification to that. I'm just going to chop the end of that off, maybe a little bit of that as well, re-sew it, and then I'll sort out a belt for him. But otherwise that's not looking bad at all. For the belt, I found this braided cotton cord. You can see if I sort of show you close up, it's not twisted cotton, this is braided, so it's got a nice sort of look to it, and it's in about the right sort of colour, the same sort of colour that I've got of this looped fleece fabric. So I'm going to cut a piece of this and tie it around. You can pick this up off eBay, or if you go to your local haberdashery shop, they should be able to help you. This is about 3.5 to 4 millimeters in diameter. It's quite thick, but it looks like it will sort of really match quite nicely. So we need a length of this. I'm guesstimating, I'm going to say about 15 centimeters should do, because you want it to be able to go around his waist, and then we're going to tie it off, and you want some bits that sort of hang down. So I think 15 centimeters should do quite nicely. So if I just cut off a piece of that, there we go, 15 centimeters. So let's tie this around his waist. I'm going to tie it around the middle, make the knot onto one side, because I think it will look better if it's sort of hanging down on one side of him. Let's just rearrange that. If I put his arm down, that'll probably hold the string in place, so it sort of hangs quite nicely. Yeah, that's not looking too bad at all. So there we go. That's a new robe for a map room version of Indiana Jones. And so here we go. Here are the final 4 figures. As you can see, they are looking really nice. I've taken the remains of what were sort of figures that had already been used for customization and turned them into some very displayable things. I really like the version with the Han Solo head on. The head is not quite right, but I like it, so I'm going to call that one Indiana Solo. The 2 map room versions I think are doing a very nice job. I'm very unlikely to find a map room version of Indy here in the UK, so these will look very good on display with the rest of my figures. And as you can see, I've added some weapons from the Hasbro release of the figures. I happen to have a whip and a couple of the guns and a sword and stuff, and I think putting those with the figures makes them look really very nice indeed. So if you have a version of the map from Indy and you're missing the cape or the robe, then check out the pattern that I put up on toy-polloi.com for Obi-Wan Kenobi's cape, because you can use that to make a very good looking robe as long as you've got the right fabric. Again, I'll put the link to that in the description, and a bit of this braided cord. You can make something that looks really lovely, and I'm really pleased with how these have come out. At the moment I've left that one at the end without any sort of robe. I will probably make a robe for him as well, because I think he looks a bit silly with that head on without any robe on, but I just thought I'd leave that there so you could see the progression from that to the finished figure. So I need to say a massive thank you to Ryan for very kindly sending over the remains of these custom figures that he's worked on, because it's been a very fun project and I've got something that I'm really pleased with here. If you've enjoyed this video, then you can head on over to toy-polloi 2 and see the actual unboxing of all the stuff that Ryan sent me, because I've uploaded that video there. Make sure to hit the subscribe button here and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow Toy Polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.